For those of you who aren't too familiar with OFAI, or if you didn't see Saeed's talk just right now, just a quick OFAI is an academic nonprofit-led partnership that aims to bend the arc of AI development towards human-centered AI with openness as a guiding design principle. Right? You can see these are our different working groups that we have. Right? Policy, it goes the gamut from policy recommendation to library advisory. I help lead up the technical prototypes group and help lead the exploratory technical group, which is what are some of our partners in the OFAI network. And what we're trying to do is that, modern technology, kind of the internet, has all been founded and built on the kind of the trinity of the government, of academia, and the public sector working together, right? And we feel like that shift is in balance now, and OFAI is hoping to help explore that. One of the things that we think about is AI as an open infrastructure stack, right? And then we think of that through policy and also through kind of technical prototypes where we live in that stack, and whether it's intended or not, this all the kind of AI has become infrastructure. And public infrastructure is really what got to where we are for a long time. Let's start with this chart here, kind of getting into the main kind of body of the talk. This is the usage chart from last year for OpenAI's token counts. This is kind of there is no kind of moment for when, a lot of faculty and things like that, they wonder, is this a problem that we can avoid? Is this something we can kind of shift away from? And my answer is no. What you see is at the end of the summer, as soon as the summer hits, the students disappear, the traffic drops, right? And you see this trend across all the different language models, right? And then we know there's been increasing number of models in adoption, especially last year in Google Gemini and other ones, right? And I like to point out around August 4th, I'm pretty sure those aren't students, those are instructors prepping for the semester, right? So I like to point that moat kind of goes around all of us. I just want to really touch point about the emerging evidence about what's happening with the unstructured adoption of AI, right? So with experts, and this was a study, and I can distribute this talk later, but there's a study done in Lancet. Basically, radiologists, after using the AI tool as an assistant or as a partner for detecting tumors, after 3 months, their baseline skills atrophy, right? For professionals, this was actually Carnegie Mellon and Microsoft. And what they did is they looked at the usage patterns of their knowledge workers using Copilot and ChatGPT within their organization. And they found that it reduced critical thinking over time, and it just very, very quickly moved towards validation. Oh, just kind of, is this good enough? Is this good enough? Passing it forward, which leads to what we all know now is AI slop, right? Is that these ideas and these hallucinations or bad citations just passing forward down the line. Creativity, there's a very interesting one, and there's a lot of existing work around this, around the internet and things like that. But it has, ChatGPT and Gemini and all these large language models are good for individual enhancement of creativity. But they're very bad at collective creativity because you're using a probabilistic window. So we have all similar inputs, we're going to get similar outputs. And that might be more creative than you, but that's not more creative than all of us. It creates a funnel that we have in the window. And we see that manifest in the classroom for my instructors, and I'm sure for all of your instructors, as they come in at the end of the semester, they say, I think I have a cheating problem. I say, how do you know? I got 40 of the same papers that were all pretty good, right? Therein kind of lies a problem there. For novices, and this was a study done on I believe for student developers for Python, the bypassing of formative struggle obviously inhibits development. They don't understand syntactic structures. They don't understand algorithms. They don't understand structure and functions. If they don't understand these things, then they don't have authentic learning, right? And they bypass these things that they need to do these things. And general population trends, they find that it's age-related patterns. Interestingly, the younger you are, the higher independence, because you lack discernment of when I should or should not be doing this, when I should be using my own thinking, when I should be more interrogating. And they found the higher the age, this goes up to 40, 50, 60, 70, that there are less usage. Clearly, some of that's going to be for the older folks. Maybe they're just not engaged in technology, but that even goes through our age groups through the middle years. And the last one is the students are just like professionals. They drift towards passive engagement patterns. Oh, this looks good enough. I'll just hand this in. And then you see that manifesting when you still had this was generated by ChatGPT, here's your paper, and then hand in their paper, right? That's a really good example of, I skimmed this, looks good enough. So what do we do? So the hyperscalers, they have a solution. They'll figure out what education means for all of us. right? ChatGPT EDU for universities. They have learning modes. They're all Socratic modes, right? And I actually do, to some extent, believe that they authentically realize they've created a problem. They need to be contributing a solution. But the problem is that their incentives, our incentives for what we're trying to do in education and research, are imbalanced, right? So, and I want to frame this as, although it may seem like I'm trying to make a competitive argument here, I'm not. I think we have a complementary argument for where higher education needs to be in this struggle and in solving this problem. And to lay out these structural issues in industry, and rightly so, they have different motives. They need to have maximum adoption. They need to have increased user engagement, market growth, revenue, and market share. All these innovations happen because of these things, and so there's good and bad in everything. But there's a conflict with what we're trying to achieve at the bottom. We care about deep learning, productive struggle, independent thinking, and epistemic development. And that productive struggle kind of component there is something that academia has been discussing for many, many years before large language models. Large language models just kind of put an exclamation point on it, right? We know that reading has been drifting for 20 years, right? Basic mathematical skills are drifting, right? It's that now with large language models and AI, it's really putting a finer point. This is something we need to pay attention to, as there are these things that we can offload our cognitive load. So what do? We hope that this is perhaps DARE is maybe one solution to help. DARE is a platform. DARE means Dietrich Analysis Research Education Platform. We hope it is a complete ecosystem, but we kind of think of it as a starter pack, and everything is designed around this principle that you're going to see. Everything is designed around these principles you're going to see here in a minute. Just really quickly, just so you know, kind of the history. This project's been going for roughly 2 years. It started almost 3 years now, we're in 26, It started out with me helping lead a teaching committee on what the implications are, doing some beta chatbots at Carnegie Mellon, and then actually getting to know Saeed, and he invited me to work on OFAI with the technical prototype group. And we've been developing this for the last 2 years, iterating with talking to faculty, talking to researchers, and asking them what's important to them. Where do we need to speed things up? Where do we especially need to slow things down? The governing philosophy is simplicity. But how do we take this complex thing, this shock and awe model of the hyperscalers of bigger, badder, more complex, more reasoning, and they want to offload the thinking for you. They want you just to say, you know what, this thing's too complex. I can't even figure out how to do it. You do it for me. That's what they want. What we want is to distill what the basics are about using the models, about interaction, or about the interfaces, so that you can basically hold something in your hand and you can think through how you would solve a problem, what your normal processes are, and how you implement that in with this new technology. We call we hope to achieve this, but what we call DARE's action framework, right? And that we want to put AI in the passenger seat. AI is in the loop and the human is driving, right? So we do this by trying to preserve agency, promoting control, transparency, informed decisions, openness, and nuanced understanding of your actions. So all the things we build in DARE are trying to focus on this framework and these principles, basically to put you back in control, or the student, or the researcher, or the user. Within DARE, the DARE system is built with its own learning kind of progression. So there are training materials that are self-help that anyone can use. They're just in the help file. And we believe this is the basic progression of technical skills you need to learn around using large language models, right? And they're basically, they're platform agnostic, they're discipline agnostic. These are just kind of the how-tos of the road, right? And they're kind of based on, in the way that the DARE agent that helps you work is based on this idea of the zone of proximal development, that if you have somebody or a little tutor that are helping you, you can keep progressing through and increasing your capability stack. We've also built lectures and deployed lectures and taught them at CMU around the DARE platform. You can see that the lecture topics are structured around the self-help so that they can work in tandem for students who want to go deeper dives. So far, we've done mini lectures and mini micro series and courses, and we're looking at building this out into a full course this fall. They've been well received by students. Get a little bit into the platform. I'm actually going to go live. Hopefully the internet keeps cooperating with me. So DARE as a platform is going to look very similar to many API gateways that you've used before. right? And by and large, that's what it's supposed to be. We don't want it to be something alien. We want something that looks native, something that's very user-friendly. We have your dark mode, we have your light mode. And in the main dashboard, all you're seeing is you're seeing your KPIs for usage. Like how many messages am I sending? How many conversations, files? Which models am I using? What much traffic? How much have I spent with them? These are the actual API costs, one-to-one. There's no translation between them. We charge what the charge is. You can set wallet sizes and control costs by your student population. My wallet's a little bit bigger than what we usually issue to students, right? But faculty can request, a certain amount of tokens and wallets and things like that. And we give it on a $5 for students. We give it on a $5 a month cycle. That's what roughly 750,000 tokens or words. Usually works out pretty well just for kind of their basic assignments, right? We want them to understand, like I said, real world costs. They can audit their wallet. They can see what they cost. They can look at how they've been spending their money. The most asked for, and the one we've been working on the longest, is energy consumption. Everyone wants to know what these things cost in energy. The answer is there's no reliable general metric to use. All the companies, they tell you what they cost for the pre-training, and they say, don't worry about inference, right? It doesn't cost that much, except for we know now inference at scale costs as much as the pre-training because of how much there's going through these models, right? But how much it costs per, especially if you're using models that create prompts over prompts over prompts, it's very hard to distinguish what it is. So it's hard for me to create a defensible one. But that question gets answered every time, so I hope I answered it in advance. Everything within DARE is chosen and created by the user. It's prompt driven, and you have to create all of your prompts. You come into your environment with nothing. The only thing that is here is a blank screen and a palette for you to start thinking about how you would create, what you would do, why you want to do things. As opposed to when you're in ChatGPT or you're in Claude, you're dealing with basically a personality that looks like this, which is hundreds of lines of instructions that go next to every word that you type and input into the system. So people wonder why the model drifts away from its directions, why the model does other things, because they don't even understand they're working with a persona that's sitting on top of the model. Right? And this is just one easy way we can peel back a layer for most users in very simple, approachable ways. And another fun thing is that you understand that these personalities, they're designed this way, they can hallucinate, but it's a feature, not a bug, right? And the easiest kind of example of that is I can take Claude's personality, and I can put it on GPT 5.2, and I say, which model are you? So I'm Claude, it happily will tell you it's Claude Sonnet 4. So that's what its personality told it to be, right? Is that your system prompts and the things you build are model agnostic, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do very easily train people on and help people understand that these are all tools that are interchangeable, right? These are system prompts that are controllable. These are things that you have agency and control in. And then that goes to file. So first you learn how to use system prompts to steer the model into behaviors that you want, right? And then, well, how do you bring your own data? How do you bring the files in, right? So DARE allows you to bring files in two formats. It brings it in as the full text the full text file and the vector embedding version for however you want to have your overlap set up. And then these can be called dynamically within conversations. So a lot of people say, this just looks like a regular chat. It is with a couple minor tweaks. Right. Before I kind of get into what the tweaks are, I want you to think of like what breaks are for. This analogy that a friend of mine gave me, I really appreciate. You ask students what breaks are for, and they say breaks are for slowing down. And I'm like, no, that's what breaks do. But what are they? Why are they on your car? What are they for? Well, they're for safer acceleration. We want safer acceleration. What DARE hopes to be an environment that helps promote safer acceleration around the use of large language models. So you can do things like intentionally choose what data is part of the conversation when. Everything's brought in dynamically. It can be the vector embeddings. If I'm doing similarity search, I'm looking for patterns. I can couch that within the full context of the file and bring the whole file in. Most systems allow you to do one or the other. So if you're using anything LLM or GPT for all, that's vector embeddings only, right? If you're in ChatGPT, that's full files only. Right? Unless you know how to set up projects and you know how to set up the things like that, you can harness these things. Most people don't even know the difference, right? So DARE helps you peel back those layers. And another thing about DARE is the dynamic nature of the way you can call files in, is that scholars know that information has temporal importance. If I'm working on a long paper, I only care about these papers for the intro or the second section or the method section, right? DARE allows you to control these things, not only control the data, you can control what prompt is governing what you're trying to achieve. So you might have some type of, right here, you can see this is a history project here. NHNN was an archive of, it was called the National Negro Health News. And I created 4 prompts around doing that analysis, right, for different parts of it, right? And that's an archive that sat in the Hathi Trust for many years until there was just too much qualitative data to figure out how to catalog. With large language models, we can do it quite quickly and quite easily. But we should be able to define the agents, define the processes. It should be under our control. We don't want to offload these things. This is for defensibility around scholarship as well. It's not just students. Scholars need to show, now that we're in the new age of journals, and then journals say, well, you can use AI, but you have to defend it. Well, if you make your own prompts, you have intentionality about what you're doing. And, this also goes with kind of, in the copyright law, at least in the United States, is that the only thing that's defensible around your outputs is your inputs. Copyright law in the United States protects system prompts, does not protect the outputs of your prompts, right? Because what the United States copyright cares about and patent office cares about is sufficient human endeavor, right? And then you can show your human endeavor. You can choose any models dynamically. So if Claude is better at one thing and Gemini is better at another thing, or if your environment, you have access to Mistral or DeepSeek or open source models, there is agnostic to any type of models. Whatever you can host, you can attach to, right? You also control the memory, right? So if you're having a conversation that you want to reference or you want to branch away from, create new conditions, try to do some type of manual workflow process, you're in control of how that data works, right? So on the right, you can rename the conversations. It could be branch A-2-3, right? You're in control of that. And then you can also export your work. So here's an example of the research process that I had mentioned earlier. And I exported my work. So this could be done for a student. One of the assignments we did with students this semester was they were supposed to, as a group, design a system prompt, help them work through a reading. And then they're supposed to use that system prompt on the reading and then hand in their log here. And they're only graded on their questions. They're graded on their critical thinking, their veracity, which they engage the information. We don't care anything about their prompts. We don't care about the outputs. We care about the inputs only, right? Because the instructor that I was working with, we really interrogated, like, what is the point of a reading? The point of the reading is to engage in critical thinking. It's not to read. Reading is a product of it. Reading is part of the process, similar to what are breaks for, right? Breaks for slowing down. Well, reading is to get information, but what we're trying to do is promote critical thinking, right? So this is just the old math. When you were a kid, show your own work. It shows you the vector embeddings. It shows you the references, shows you where they came from the source files, right? So that you can go back and you can do your references. And this goes from students all the way up to the researchers if they need to show the provenance of where their files came from, right? So this is just kind of a quick way to keep moving through. Finally, that kind of last things here are workflows. Once you've modeled something in a workflow, you might say, I'd like to automate that. So what we've done is we've built in a agentic workflow, a node-based workflow environment. It's built up of all the components we just discussed. What am I trying to achieve that you've expressed in system prompt? What is the data I'm trying to manipulate? And what is the process I'm trying to do? Right? And you can see that you can get a piece of information. This is just a very basic one just to kind of show how it works. Right, and then UI needs cleaned up a little bit. Sorry, they accidentally shrunk my context windows. I mentioned they upgraded some things, and then of course that's how development works, right? And then you can see it's just moving through a series of different steps here, and then just to show this can then break down to 2 parallel steps: creating a study guide and an argument map after I've done this processing that information to generate these 2 kind of outputs. There also allows you to create logic. We also have logic nodes. So if you wanted to have like a large language model make a judgment on something, you can require human validation or fully automate it to let it go ahead and work through a process. And before I move on, I just want to see if there's any questions about there. And I was going to mention a couple other things that are part of the ecosystem.
I have a few questions actually. So this is probably more kind of CMU question. So does CMU have commercial arrangements with the hyperscalers for model access for students?
Yes.
It is, okay. And then that's divvied up across the students based on the budget each year?
No, so basically the way it works in the United States is that we have to have things that are FERPA compliant. Right? So FERPA compliance is similar to GDRP, right? So each of the hyperscalers and large companies have to be willing to sign on as what's called a FERPA partner. right? And as part of these contracts, and they already have these protections on the business side, agree not to do training, but they have to provide an additional layer of saying, yes, we will be a FERPA partner. So it's just kind of like a double handshake on the same idea. Everything we do is through the API gateways, right? Depending on your organization, is going to be kind of the number of protections you have in your contract. So we were just discussing, actually, after a couple conversations with different people, especially earlier today, is that I just checked to see what Azure has, because we have an Azure license, right? And I just noticed they have DeepSeek and Mistral and some of the other open models. So I actually messaged our main IT group to make sure to see if those are approved within our environment, right? So a lot of these are just contractual. Of course, if you self-host, if you have a cluster you self-host, you can point to anything you want. And then they're also set up that if you want to use Olama and host internally, you can actually point at Olama models that run local. You can have a local wallet, right? And you can also bring your own key, right? So if you're a student and you ran out of your $5 allotment, you want to go charge it up because you like the Dare interface because it gives you some more control of prototyping, then you could just go ahead and just plug in your own keys.
And in terms of the privacy piece, so does CMU kind of mask identifiable information, or is it just that you have a commitment from the hyperscaler to not store or record?
So all of the hyperscalers, they contractually claim, all right, so I will couch that and contractually claim that they do no training or observations on anything through the API. So it's as much as we trust that. So it's couched in that.
And just one, well, I have a few other questions, but I want to hog it. Okay, Derek. So the other one is, does this system generate a learner interaction metadata that can then be used by the assessor to kind of understand the pedagogy or the critical thinking or the progress towards addressing the challenge?
So actually students ask this question, and I'm glad they do. So what are my privacy? I said, you have the same expectation of privacy as your university email. Is that these are things that are run on the university premises. They are controlled by university personnel, and they are accessible for basically quality control reasons. We do have the capability, if we were to run a research study, we have discussed this, we would cordon off an area and just actually create basically affirmations, and we'd have to go through our IRB. But we have also created that yes, you actually could do this as a classroom condition and capture the logs, and you just have to get consent from the students, right? But that was one of the things that in our research portion of that is that we care deeply about doing this, but we want to be able to preserve privacy, right? So the default privacy is that we don't share, right, with anybody except for, this is a controlled thing. It's just like email to infrastructure at a university, right? If a lab or if an instructor does want to do a study on it, then we would go through our standard IRB protocols to make sure that we had all our human consumption research things under control.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, we've one here.
Does the contractual obligations about the API that alone satisfies FERPA?
Yes and no, okay. Right? So Azure, so your path resistance, just so you know, is going through Microsoft because most of you already have an Azure license, and Azure has Microsoft very early on was willing to take the legal risk of saying, we're a FERPA partner already, so sure, now we have OpenAI models, right? So that was really early on. So at first, we actually only use Azure OpenAI models, only exclusively, because that's the only ones we have protections on. Over the course of subsequent years, we've talked to other vendors, OpenAI became a partner, things like that, right? And then the legal language got settled more about what you can use through an API gateway, what is contractual obligations, et cetera, right? So that's going to be your university's contract tolerance, right? But generally, the most safe, because Microsoft is willing to take the risk, is Azure, right? And they do have, so you could go to all of your models, you can get your Claude models. So they've also decided in the last year, much to the OpenAI chagrin, to become a marketplace, right? Because all of a sudden they're like, we put Claude on here too. It's pretty good. OpenAI was not happy about that. I thought it was pretty funny personally, right? Yeah, so I hope that helps.
Yeah.
We just have time for one more question because I want to make sure Vince gets a chance to finish his presentation. So, yeah.
The focus of the tool is on learning, and rather than doing research publications, or is it also allowed to do research publications? How is this integrity approach?
Yeah, so it's funny. I just had this conversation with another gentleman. It's very good for novice users to understand how the bells and whistles work, kind of like a manual car. And it's also good for advanced users. And I think everybody's in the middle, learns some skills and goes uses one of the hyperscalers is my guess, right? But to answer your question more directly is I can show you a project. Let me see here. So why might you want to use DARE instead of Gemini for a research project, right? So that's a good question. So it depends how much manual thinking that you want to show that you're doing, right? And that's up to the tolerance of the researcher. I don't pursue, like, one thing that we like to say is DARE is an open palette. We don't try to prescribe how or what you should do. We want to make you capable of expressing things in the way that your processes work, right? So DARE, this is actually an example of the DARE agent. I come in here, and this is actually a research project about the sexual education trends over a 20, 30-year period in the United States, right? And the researchers were very reticent about using one of the large language models because they couldn't check provenance. They don't understand what the reasoning is happening. They don't get to create the agents to kind of control the inputs and the outputs. So what we did in DARE is we basically taught them how all the bells and whistles work. And we said, you can create these custom prompts. You can have this historical context analyzer, thematic coding, right? And we took their existing processes and then we mapped them into a series of agents to achieve these things, right? So now they can say, here's my scholarly process, here's my research process, here's how it's expressed, here's how we tested it, here's how we validated it, right? So we use AI as a tool to enhance and augment what we were doing at scale, but we still used our scholarly process to do it, right? So that's what we hope there meets kind of that middle ground of control for kind of scholars who want to take the time to be deliberate. And people have asked me, isn't this just taking more time to do the same thing? I'm like, yeah, it's exactly what I'm trying to do, right? As give you that time to have your cognitive window, your metacognitive window paused, right? Because we know that deep learning, deep thinking happens in the pauses. Right? The eurekas happen not when I'm getting assaulted with information and I'm reasoning and validating. They're happening when I'm deliberate about what I'm thinking about. Right? So we're hoping DARE, like I said, is just enough break. We're not trying to stop anything. We just want you to be able to pump the brake and say, should I train a new agent to do this? A new thinking partner to do this? Is this a tool or is this a guide? Am I analyzing? What am I doing? What are the states? And DARE is kind of, we hope DARE is a vehicle to help that type of expression.
If I can add just one thing, we're working with a historian at Brown University who's thinking about what does a new container of publication look like if you have this publication, right? So in her field, it's the monographs and the claim to fame of the publication, and so on. And she's working with the university press to explore those questions in addition to the publishing paper monograph. What outputs from the systems will count as proper scholarly outputs in the field? So there is some conversation on it. We haven't actually heard back from her yet about what that will be, but we would be very eager to incorporate that. And others feedback as well.
And the rest is going to be just quick hits and surveys of other tools that are kind of the DARE. When we say ecosystem, I only showed you one thing, just show you a couple other toys, right? So one, people ask, what if I don't want somebody to see what my prompts look like and I just want to make something? So this is basically our version of custom GPTs. We call this the agent helper framework, right? Instead of just having one basic system prompted or RAG-based agent, you can actually have a helper agent you see on the left, where it can assist in a process, it can track things, it can summarize, right? And this is packaged with DARE right now. So as soon as you create a DARE account, we automatically create a Socratic Bots account. A lot of our classes have used it for undergraduates, have hackathons, because they all want to make their own cool tool. I'm like, cool. But a lot of them can't code, right? Like, can you express in a natural language what you want to do? And they can all do that very well, right? So they can all create their own tools. They can create chatbots. They can create like ancient technology. Gandalf, this was for a philosopher, one of my philosophers. He said, hey, can you make me a chatbot that does ancient technology? And I said, only if I can make it talk like Gandalf, which he agreed. And then you point out little things like, guess what? But these large language models are good at multiple languages. So I say, hey, I'm a native Chinese speaker. Can you do that for me in Chinese? And it just flips, right? We have talked about turning voice mode on as an option. We have a lot of features in the background that aren't in production. We don't want to overwhelm students, and right now we want to keep the interaction here. A couple other smaller tools. That's Socratic Bots. We have a tool for classroom management called Exit Tickets that we just actually put in production. And what exit tickets does is exactly what it sounds like. Instructors can ask a series of questions, and what it does is it's an AI smart form. And as they input their thing, it gives them a score. If it's too low, it doesn't get accepted, right? And that way, the instructor can ensure they get good information about the course. We also use it as kind of a head-fake way to take attendance, right? So we have a couple of instructors piloting that, using that. That was developed with some of our instructors teach these very large section classes, right? But it's also getting used this semester in our IRS courses for labs, live during lab. After each section of the lab, he says, hey, I want a reflection about what happened in exit ticket so I can read it later. Then he can aggregate and look at how his course is going. Is the workshop hitting? What is he missing? And then there's always room for students to say, hey, what else do you want to tell me? Here's a bunch of their use cases. We've done debate bots, writing assistants, research agents, structured workflows, assignment, custom chatbots, multi-agentic system, research methodologies, AI in the loop, etc. And we have some more formal tools for research, basically doing corpora research, because this goes to kind of your question earlier. What if you have a whole corpora you do research against? This was built around interviews and transcripts. We have one of our historians. He's a golf historian. He focused on women's golfers, pros. And he had like 300 interviews over the course of 20 years. And he's like, I don't know what to do with this. And we said, we know what to do with it. Just do it us. And what we did, we made an interface where he could create structured data types and points. So we basically, first we took them, we transcribed them, we validated them, we have all of them in a database, and now he can do structured, basically searches across the whole corpora by creating structured data types, right? And then reconstructing narratives and things like that. So those are just some examples of things that you can do in kind of the DARE tools. The production ones right now, some of these are in beta, but DARE and Socratic bots are in production. And if anyone is interested in collaborating, trying to do getting access to doing the deployment, we'd love to talk to you. Future directions, I should get to this last slide here, is partnerships around DARE or in OFAI in general. We've been integrating MCP so we've been doing MCP integration, which is in our staging, which is our dev environment. We've been doing AI literacy workshops in the community built around DARE. We've been working with our local kind of state colleges and other R1s and research institutions about the partnerships. So if anyone's interested, we'd love to hear. The source code hasn't been fully. This will get asked. We're hoping for a full release this summer, right? But right now we're still in kind of burn-in. Everything's going good, so we don't foresee any issues with that. But if you'd love to be an early partner, whether you do a pilot, we can create you a sandbox, help you with deployment, we would love to hear.
Fantastic. Thanks a million. Just wondering if anyone else, we have a few minutes left. Does anyone else have any questions? Any observations or anything?
Just a quick one. So I saw MCP there. So presumably that would address kind of scaling if people have generated a cool agent, they want to share it outside of CMU. There's a way to. Yeah,
there's a couple ways to consider doing that. So right now you can see, since you asked, we haven't figured out. We don't want to make the interface too complex. So we're thinking that we're going to create different roles, researcher, things like that. This is the one that has everything, right? So you can see there's all kinds of different tools that we did building. You can create charts. We're creating a co-editing artifact window. Like usually when you have an artifact in Canvas, you can't edit it. You just have to do it. So we've been trying to build a window where you can co-edit, right? You can React components, you can do coding, things like that. And then to your point, MCP integrations. Right now we're focused on making MCP calls. But one of our other projects is how do we get workflows to become MCP calls from other people, right? So that's one of the projects we've been working on. And something else which is kind of interesting, this has just got put in, so mine has no memory. But we've actually been we've been implementing different memory packages for the DARE system itself, that if you want to keep a memory profile and semantic memory, episodic memory, things like that, and factual memory about your profile, that you have that capability. So these are all things that are in the kind of the beta and the dev environment. But yeah, so we're just trying to keep pace with the pace that everything is going, right? And trying to keep the tools there while trying to preserve simplicity, which is a tough balance, right? And simplicity means different things for people, right? So in the end, what we imagine, and we hope it's kind of like Lego blocks. You log into their environment, you're like, oh, for these class of instructors, I want these features on, check, 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 check. These students get these models, check, 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 and you can set it up however you want.
Anybody else? Any other questions you have, Bill?
You mentioned at the end you're looking for collaborators and potential engagement. I'm just curious what you're looking at there. I know a lot of institutions are sort of building platforms similar in nature to DARE, and how do you see that collaboration happening process? You might want to use it.
Yeah, so if you're just looking to do pilots, we're just happy to host it for you. If you want to do an on-site full deployment, we're happy to help too, right? Our goal, like in a perfect world, we would love for there to be a DARE network of schools that all use similar infrastructure. We can build community around it, shared practices, shared goals, right? Another one of the partnerships that you probably saw here that you probably I should have leaned into is Open Mind is a company. They're a nonprofit, and what they do is they do federated data, and think of them as the Dropbox for AI. Right, so we've been working with them on what does that infrastructure look like if we had multiple DARE sites, and Sai and I are different places, but we want to share a data set, we want to share workflows, we want to share conversations. How does that look like that? How do we track provenance? How do we pull things back, right? We're working with our libraries, talking about these archives projects, like what does it mean to borrow an archive in the AI age if it's all vector embedding, right? Right, but I don't want to pay for all your inference. Right? Like I can't afford for your scholars to do all my inference. What does it mean for another library to check things out? Right? So these are all questions that we're asking that we're like spinning up projects and kind of doing designs for. But it basically means whatever engagement you guys are interested in, or you can just wait for the drop and you can do whatever you want. So